everybody on the from the state of affairs today. It's a conversation that will be based on things that are away from politics. Normally, we do conduct sessions on international relations, and then occasionally I have invited guests from social circles who have talked over multiple issues from society to politics and their professional careers. And then today we have with us somebody who personally I have been too much inspired by. The reason being that she always keeps the bar high when it comes to debates and discussions. Uh, I would first of all like thank her that she accepted the invitation on the very short notice. It was supposed to actually get conducted yesterday, but then she have had the slammed schedule of her own. We couldn't. So today we are back with this conversation. I hope that you will like it and you will also spread this thing, and it will be totally something that where nobody is going to take any pot shot on any other political competitor. This is not the podium, this is not the platform for such thing. We have with us today a very, very special guest, Ifra Jan. I guess this is the first conversation I'm going to have with her. So I will leave it to the sagacity and wisdom of her to introduce and then pick that thing up from there. First of all, welcome Ifra to our show.
Thank you, Mirat sir. Thank you for calling me to your show.
So tell us more about you, because we normally have been watching you debating as an additional spokesperson of Jammu and Kashmir National Conference. There must be more to Ifra Jan. What's it like? Your education and other things?
Yeah. My education, I primarily studied in Tiny Heart School. Then I went to Koti Bagh Higher Secondary School for girls. And then from there, I went to St. Stephen's College to pursue my history honors. Uske baad, I've been doing law and almost done with it. And now I'm planning to go ahead for my master's in law. So that's pretty much who I am academically. Even though when I passed out of 10th grade, I had very good marks, I had a position, and everyone was like, why would you not pursue medical and non-medical sciences, in the sense, why not go for science? So I think that was the first little rebellion that I took, and I was like, no, I don't really want to do this, and instead I would want to go to humanities because that's where my heart lay. And when I was in college, I really wanted to pursue my academics. I wanted to continue with history as an academic subject, and history not in the sense the kind of history we understand, but a very rigorously methodological way, the way it's taught to us, So I wanted to go ahead with subaltern history. But unfortunately, for some reasons, I had to come back for a moment to back to my house. And because of that, that thing got a break. So my academic career was broken because of because of something which wasn't really in my hand. And I thought I'll go back, but that never happened. And instead, then I came into a completely different field, which I'd imagined. If you were to ask me what I'd imagined myself to be all my life, I'd imagined myself to be a professor all my life, teaching academics, pursuing academics. And here I am in something which is sometimes seen as the antithetics to, sometimes it's seen as the antithetical to academics itself. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
one thing I would like to one thing I would like to add upon here is that if it was all about getting to humanities and pursuing academics and higher education, and did politics happen like as a very good stroke of luck?
It did, but to be very honest, when I think of academics, I never would do very simple academics. When you think of subaltern academics, you think of it in terms of speaking for those groups that haven't been able to speak for themselves, So it's obviously not charity. It's obviously not you doing something to somebody else. But what it is that you trying to correct some wrong. You may never be able to correct it, but you're trying to fill in that gap for somebody else who's not been able to do it. So I think that was a feeling in me which then got manifested in different ways. It got manifested in the way I want to do academics and speak for those groups which had been marginalized in history, whose voices don't get carried out so easily, who really don't have the vocabulary to speak to the outside world. So I think that in turn then got manifested in politics. So because I used to do this kind of stuff, or if you may call it activism, I had a friend who messaged me once when Article 370 was abrogated. I had a friend from NDTV, a very close friend. She messaged me saying, Ifra, I read your a long set of tweets on Article 370 abrogation. Would you want to come to NDTV and say all of this on television? Would you just want to say this? I thought कि मैंने लिख ही दिया है Twitter पे, even though I was scared, to be honest, given the fact that everybody was getting arrested under UAPA, everybody was getting detained. But I was like, fine, man, I don't care. Many anyway ये tweets लिख ही दिए हैं. I'm anyway speaking so loudly. Why not just go and say this on NDTV? And NDTV is NDTV. So that's how I started my TV career. Uh, and
And
then
then,
once I did NDTV, I then stuck to NDTV for a very long time. And then I started getting calls from different channels. Even though a lot of people ask me that, there were some channels, for example, I go to, some people don't agree with those channels and they say that you shouldn't legitimize going to those channels. And I've always had a disagreement. I do not disagree with them on the fact that these channels are spreading hate, and some of these channels are what you may call the Radio Rwanda of India. But they will carry on the discussion irrespective of whether you go or whether you don't go. So you would rather go and put that little point that you have, put that little disagreement that you had in those two 20 seconds that you get, because that's the tiny little chance that you get. And that's how I continued doing it, and I ended up doing around what 1000 TV shows. um and given the fact that my family, I have a family background with National Conference. My grandfather was associated with National Conference um, since 1930s. I don't know, जब पहला शेख साहब का जलसा हुआ था 1930 में. My grandfather was a participant, was one of the organizers in that protest against the Maharaja. And ever since that, my family has been into National Conference, but not into electoral politics. In 1975, 1976, actually, um, Sagar Sahab, a very senior leader, came to my grandfather and told him, you've been associated with National Conference for so long now. Why would you just not fight the elections on our ticket? And why would you not just take the mandate? You be our voice from Islamabad, Anantnag, Mutton. And my grandfather responded saying that अगर मैंने आज आपका मैंडेट ले लिया, अगर मैंने आज आपकी टिकट ले ली, तो मेरा और शेख साहब का जो रिश्ता है ये दुनियावी बन जाएगा, ये रिश्ता फिर रूहानी नहीं रहेगा. That is the kind of politics my family was into for so long. And that's why I had an inclination for the National Conference. And eventually I was anyway doing TV, anyway speaking up, anyway being so loud. And I had anyway put myself at a huge risk. I was like, why not just take this plunge, And then I took that plunge.
it's quite interesting. Most of the people might not be knowing this thing, that your family has an association long, since long, with the National Conference. But then to our next thing, that the parlance and the language of politics is different as compared to other social echelons that normally we talk. We have had conversations, and you can go to the debates on the television, but then the very trajectory of politics is different, and so is the political lexicon, so is the social lexicon. So what do you distinguish between the two things, like at the social level if you debate, and then at the political level you're representing a party, so there must be something different, is it?
That's what I'd imagine. I thought joining politics would be very different from being a person who who sort of, personal is political, as they say. If there are personal issues, political issues that you have with the political party, at the end of the day, those political issues will be those personal issues which have a basis in law, which have a basis in state being unfair to you, which have a basis in inequality in the society. They are going to get, if you want to correct them, they're not just going to get corrected on a social level. Political parties, state assemblies, governments have huge power to correct them. So if you're a political activist, if you're helping inequality by, let's suppose, opening an NGO, opening a charity, if you're somebody who is helping, let's suppose there are so many people who are getting arrested under UAPA. If you're a lawyer who's just helping them with a pro bono, lawyering, you're just helping them with the kind of things you're doing, you're feeding their families. If you're also a political representative who's saying, listen, this is not how government should run, and we are going to come forward and make sure that this is not how government runs, and these are not the things that should be happening at a governmental level, from because so much of it is controlled by the government itself. I don't really see such a huge difference between somebody who's helping that person directly and somebody like me who's saying that this case in the first place should never be filed, or Article 370 should never be abrogated, because so much of what is happening to us is happening because a political party chose. I mean, I don't want to name the party, but a political party chose that this should happen. And you will have to respond to that politics politically. You will have to get into electoral politics. I don't think, Mehrad Sahab, I don't think we have the luxury of staying away from politics anymore. I understand somebody who has everything in life, who wants his life to continue the way it is, who doesn't feel enraged about anything, who has so much privilege that to him he doesn't I mean, it doesn't matter to him which party comes to power. But if you're not that privileged, if you feel the rage inside you, how are you going to correct it other than sitting on your camera, or other than sitting on your Facebook and typing galis to every person you don't like? Is that the way? Is that going to change anything? And if you want to change anything, then you will have to begin yourself.
And one more thing, see, there is also something that we say, say for example, a person is joining politics with the caveat that, see, I'll make a value addition to the party or to the political outfit that I belong to. So did this thing come to your mind that you will be adding value to the national conference?
You see, to be honest, national conference is a huge party. It has a cadre that's spread over lakhs, to be honest. So I don't think one individual person can really add so much to the party. I mean, a party like this. I understand if you have a very small party, one person can make a huge difference. I don't think one person in national conference, to be very honest, can make such a huge difference that, I am going to be adding value to the party. It's a party that's been there for 70 years. It's a party that's faced the kind of onslaught that you wouldn't imagine. It's a party that's been in jail for what, 25 years cumulatively. I don't think one individual person really can add much to the party. But yes, I would say that when more and more people start coming in, when more and more people start building up, eventually you do strengthen the party. But it's like, as they say, पानी का एक एक कतरा जो है वो समंदर बनाता है. And this is something, when you join politics, a lot of people assume that, oh, you are joining politics because there is money in politics, because there is richness in politics. And this is a very wrong idea of politics that a lot of people have. Because it's like saying every businessman is rich. No, every businessman is not rich. There is a chota businessman, Reddy Wala, he's also a businessman. He's not rich. There is Ambani, he's also a businessman. He is very rich, So the problem in politics at this point is that which side of politics are you on? Are you on the ruling side of politics? Are you on the opposition side of the politics? If you're on the opposition side of politics, that essentially means that you will have to put a huge risk to your career. I mean, I could take a flight, go abroad, live a very luxurious life. मैं हर जगह गाली खाती हूँ, कितने लोगों से गालियां खानी पड़ती हैं, कितने लोगों की ताने सहने पड़ते हैं. Why do you do this? You put yourself at huge risk कि PSA लगा देंगे, कल को UAPA लगा देंगे, and they've done it to so many people. Why would they not do it to you? So, you put yourself at huge risk. You put your career at huge risk. You put your entire life at huge risk. आज if you ask somebody with a clerk job in a government, अगर government में कोई clerk होगा, उसको बोलो आप अपनी clerk government की job छोड़ दो and you start speaking for people and you become an activist, they will not do that. But when somebody like me does it, I mean, a lot of people don't understand that this is a sacrifice you will. I mean, I have given whether, I mean, it's in front of me and Allah, He knows it. At the same time, I would also want to tell people who want to join politics, who have an inclination for politics, that if you want to join National Conference or a non-ruling political party at this point, do not think of money. Do not think that you will be rich. Think of it in terms of sacrifice. You will have to forego a lot of things. So, you will probably have to, जो भी आपका business है, your money is going to come from your own business, your own thing. Instead, यहाँ पे you will have to forego a lot of things. You will have to forego monetarily. You will have to forego your liberty. You will have to forego a lot of things. But yes, the satisfaction that you will have when you sleep every night, that you did the right thing. You spoke for your people. You spoke for what was right. You spoke while you put your life at risk. That is going to be very, very fulfilling, because at the end of the day, you only get to live once, and you don't take your money, you don't take your riches, you don't take any of that with you. You take that satisfaction with you.
And then see, there is also some more thing that we can talk about, is that normally politics has changed, so has the language of politics changed over the time. See, we have seen that hashtags are being run, vitriolic campaigns are being run against a particular individual for personal reasons, for political reasons. And then we have also seen that people dig into your personal stuff, and then also there is something that we say people are not behaving in a professional political way. Have we stooped so low in a political arena and political context that we are conducting ourselves in?
You see, you have to understand that, when we say that all political parties are the same, it's like a teacher in the class saying that all of you children are the same. What that does is that it somehow allows the student who's the worst in the class, who's a backbencher, who's doing the worst sort of things in the class, and it sort of tells him that there is no incentive for anybody to do well, because no matter what you do, we are going to say that you guys are all the same. It's like, or imagine if it's like, if there are 3 children, one is doing relatively better, the other is doing fine, the third one is doing really bad. You got to appreciate the person who is doing even relatively better, because that's how you incentivize others to do well. What we see in politics is that nobody, there is no incentive for political. What we do, we are told कि आप सभी एक जैसे हो. If we go to jail for 25 years, you guys are the same. What's the thing you did? If we are the ones who are facing personal attacks, really bad personal attacks, instead of standing up with us and instead of standing up with a woman like me who's been going through so much, people come and say, you guys are all the same. I think it's time for the audience, the electorate in a society which includes people like you, are not the electorate. You guys are not the students. You guys are the teachers. It's time for you to keep an eye on who is doing what, who is using the kind of political language you do not like, who is character assassinating women, who is coming forward and starting vitriolic attacks on women. And you would then be able to judge who is able to do it and call them out. Don't say all politics is bad. I mean, don't say one party which has like one party where 50% of the people have criminal cases against them is the same as a party which has like 2% people with criminal cases against them. They are not the same parties. Don't say a party that uses genocidal language, that conducts genocidal rallies, is the same kind of party as a party that speaks of love, that speaks of non-violence, that speaks of tolerance. It's not the same thing. There are parties trying to do well, there are parties trying to do better, and you just have to keep an eye on that instead of saying, ah, mujhe kya, ye to sabhi ek jaise hain. Keep an eye on who's doing what. You have the vote, and the vote means the power to judge. You are the one who's sitting there as a judge. It's a huge, huge responsibility. And when you say, I don't care, you guys are all the same, you basically say you incentivize the worst in the lot. And I guess that is where a fundamental
See,
problem
I have,
lies.
I have a point to make here. With respect to what you say, is that see, we are living in a world where technologies have upgraded themselves to a level where, I mean, there is lots of availability of information, and then its assimilation, its execution. And normally what we do that, we most of the youngsters who are living in this part of the world, they do have issues like, they don't normally, they're the first generation learners. Obviously they don't know, most of them don't know the better and best use of the technologies they have. Given the fact that if you say, for example, that a person who is subscribing to a particular ideology in politics may not necessarily, collide with you when you are in some sort of coalition, ideological coalition with some other political outfit. That you talk of peace, you talk of love, you talk of secularism, you talk of whatnot. But in our part of the world, we normally do make mess of all the technologies that we have. I mean, we are not that much intellectually placed. We are not level-headed people. We cannot make good use of the technology. That's why we reach to the different conclusions. Number one. Number two, in the battle of perceptions or in the battle of narrative building, if you are fighting a political party, okay, it's fine. It's your constitutional right. Every political party can do that. But is it leading us all towards a point of inflection where society will be like, taken for granted, fault lines will be exposed, and the constitutionality of the society and the politics is going out of the window?
You see, constitutionality of the society and politics has already gone out of the window. I don't see what is left to save there, except for the opposition voices that are still going strong, except for the opposition voices who are still there to say, okay, this is wrong and this is right. No, and given the fact that, it comes at a huge cost to us. That's the same for the few media houses. I mean, if there are some few politicians left who are saying, no, this is right and this is wrong, and what you're doing is wrong, there are also some media houses left who are standing up and saying, no, this is right and this is wrong. And there are also some lawyers standing up. There are also some judges standing up who are saying, no, you can't do this to the constitution. A few judges here and there. So while there is an onslaught on the kind of onslaught that you're talking about on our society, on the tolerance, on peace, there is a very tiny flicker of hope. And that flicker of hope should not be, you just don't have to dismiss that altogether. And that's what I'm trying to disagree with you. If there is a judge who's trying to stand up and saying this is wrong, don't say aap sabhi judges same ho. Nahi, give that person some bit of gratitude that, in these difficult circumstances, when everybody has decided to go with the wind, you are trying to stand up. And that's why, that's the same even for our media houses. When everybody is, flying with the wind, when everybody is flying with the power, there is somebody who is standing up and saying, no, this is wrong, you need to stand up. So I would not say that this is just a one way, everyone is going one way. Yes, while 80-90% people, society, media, judiciary, that is going one way in support of the government. There is a tiny, bunch of people who are standing up and who are saying, no, this is not right. And I would also want to count them in and count them in as in separately and say, no, they stand up. As far as technology is concerned, I don't know if you've been reading those AI debates on ethics. There is no good and bad use of technology. There are good and bad humans. And a good human would do well no matter what. A bad human would do bad no matter what, whether he gets a knife, whether he gets a gun in his hand, whether he goes out and gets a car in his hand. He'll probably run over a dog. He'll probably stab somebody. Whether he gets a bank account, he'll try to siphon off money from somebody's account. If he gets a mobile phone or technology in his hand, he'll probably do what they're doing. He'll character assassinate a woman, start threatening her, make fake accounts, start talking shit about women, political opponents, use really horrible kind of language. So there is no good and bad use of technology. There are good and bad human beings. And whether you have technology, whether you have anything, people are going to use whatever is at their disposal to do whatever their basic instincts tell them to do. Again, no bad and good technology, only good and bad humans.
And then that's fair enough, very lovely and explanation of all the stuff that we have been talking until now. You must be having, like, everybody has an inspiration in since you were supposed to pursue in academics, but then out of the political, social, or compulsions that are best known to you only, that you chose to go with politics. And any inspiration
Yeah.
in humanities as a subject, like any author, philosopher, or a writer that has inspired you?
Um, when it comes to women, there are many women actually who inspire me. I find it very difficult to choose one. Um, I think the first woman who probably inspired me, and I think it's going to be a very cliche, that, we all say that, has been my mother herself, because she came from a kind of family which did not allow women to study beyond a point, which did not allow women to pursue a career. And my mother was the first woman in her entire family that stood up and said, no, I do want to continue my studies, and I do want to be a lawyer, and I do want to do law. And she also kind of, in a way, faced a social boycott, a family boycott, because of that. And it did not come easy. And I grew up listening to those stories, and she often told me those stories with a lot of pride. And I think when your mother is so strong, it automatically flows into the daughter. So even though it might be very cliche for you, but it's like a big story in my house, and it's a huge. It's a kind of experience that my mother has given me, and it's very valuable to me. When it comes to political women, to be honest, I am inspired by a lot of women in politics. Ilhan Umar, for example. If you see the kind of story, she is, for those who do not know who Ilhan Umar is, she is one Muslim woman parliamentarian or senator in the United States of America. And she's one bold voice. And you should be all listening to her speak. When nobody spoke for Kashmiris after the abrogation of 370, she was our voice. And that is something which makes my heart fill in with a lot of gratitude for her, because at least somebody spoke up for me. Asma Jahangir, who was a Pakistani author and a lawyer, is also continues to be my inspiration for the kind of work she's done for minorities. A lot of women in India, Indira Jaising, Vrinda Grover, Kavita Krishnan, Arundhati Roy, women who've been speaking what is right, what continues to be right, irrespective of the kind of onslaughts they've faced. They are my, inspirations. And again, this might come across as very cliche, but Madre Meherban, also the first Kashmiri woman who went to the Parliament of India, also happens to be my inspiration, because it was a huge thing to do at the kind point she did, and most people don't even know about her, which is very tragic, and which kind of tells you how our own history has been erased. Um, I don't want to go into there because then it will become a very political discussion. Yes, she, and also women who at this point continue. I mean, the sarpanches, the women who are doing politics, the women who are coming out, the women who are kind of facing. I mean, politics is not an easy thing for women. I'll tell you why.
I have,
Because
see, hmm yeah, go on.
mm, politics is not an easy thing for women, and I'll tell you why it's not an easy thing for women. If um agar I don't know how to explain it to you, because women in politics are judged very, very badly. And, somehow the very horrible instincts that a lot of people have are often projected onto women. For example, um, the kind of memes that we have seen on many women politicians in uh, Kashmir, if I, for example, I mean, it's a very small example. If a male politician goes and dances in a political party, it's going to be, nobody will care, and even then they'll care. They'll not. I mean, it's not going to be a big deal. If a female politician dances in a political party, imagine the kind of furore you will have. So women are judged in politics on. They are judged very, very harshly. They are judged on what they're doing. They're judged on what they're saying, which male politicians are judged, but they also judged on what they're wearing. They also judged on whether they're being a bit too loud, whether they're being a bit too soft, whether she used a bad cuss word, whether she used a good word. They're also judged on the basis of their age. For example, the number of people who've been calling me Didi. I mean, there's nothing wrong in calling me Didi or Auntie, but it's not said as a nice way, Didi, come here. It's said as an insult. They also ageism in politics that women have to face. Um, and it's also the reverse kind of ageism. So some people will go ahead and call you Didi, Auntie. The others will forcefully infantilize you, like how they infantilize women and call you a rookie, a kindergarten student, because you are not smart enough to be in politics. They will never call a male politician a rookie. They'll never call male politician a kindergarten uh, spokesperson. They will never call male politician um, they'll never call male politician, they'll never infantilize him, they'll fight him. And it's also the kind of people who come and say, what are you doing in politics? You should get back to the kitchen, Garich kam kar. So kaisne garich kam karan, if you understand Kashmiri, which means go and do the household work. Why aren't you doing the kitchen work? What are you doing here? So it's, as a woman, you're judged on many, 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 many parameters compared to, the kind of parameters you would be judged if you were a man. And also, as a woman, you're also susceptible to and exposed to a lot of violence, a lot of bullying that you wouldn't have to face if you were a man. For example, stalking is I mean, I have so many people who start calling me, who've been messaging me, sending me Instagram requests, and then they start calling me, I want to have a political discussion. The reality is that no, they don't want to have a political discussion. They just want to start a personal relationship with me under the garb of having a political discussion. It's very clearly what is a stalking behavior. A lot of men who have these fantasies will actually write a story on me and project from fake accounts and project those really horrible fantasies onto me. So as a woman, you are a lot more exposed to the kind of violence women generally face in the society. But when you were up there, when you were on a different level, and when a lot of people can see you, a lot of it can get accentuated. And that's why I do see that so many women are afraid of politics. But I would tell them, don't be afraid. All of this is meant precisely so that you come back and say, hey, I don't do this anymore. It's getting difficult. And just hold on. And any woman in politics at this point who is holding on is my inspiration.
And then I have also a point to make regarding what you said, that the people who have inspired you, be that Ilhan Omar, be that Kavita Krishnan, be that Vrinda Grover. But see, as a person who is apolitical until now, in a sense that not in the terminology sense or in the vocabulary sense, I do have political opinions, but I have not joined a political party, formally anyway. But then my limited point to make here is that there is no gold standard of either secularism or rightful conduct or ethical thing or moral thing, or any political party cannot claim the generality, in the sense that yes, there are mistakes that are being made. There are, because it's at the end of the day, it's a political slugfest where things do, I mean, go awry at times, they go south at times, they do compete for interests wherever it is the clash of interests. But down the line, if I am not, see, if I am oscillating in between the ideological thing, that say for example there is a right pole, there is a left pole, and I am oscillating in between the two, because if I see something good in right, if I see something good in left, if I see something good in center, obviously I have not subscribed. It's not necessary for me as an individual. I have this right that I must not subscribe to any particular ideology. Just take good of everything and live as a happy life that normally I am entitled to. So I wonder at times, because the debates I have seen, the people I have been watching speaking on different issues in the political capacity, it compels me to be part of this binary or that binary. I mean, that is the very bad thing that can happen to the politics that we have and to the social system that we have, because it's not necessary for me. See, if Ifra has right to say something, so has she the right to be silent. I mean, why should I compel her? Why should anybody compel her to speak upon certain thing? But see, as I'm talking in the civil capacity, if I'm entitled to speak something, say for example ABC, I am also entitled not to speak something. I must not be compelled to the point that where it becomes it's a breach on my right. So there is no gold standard of one thing or other. The way I have seen politics since 10 years, say for example, as a person I am grown up with. But these things are not happening. The political decency has just gone out of the roof. There is no other thing that politicians and people who are your companions in this political spokesperson thing, they don't talk off the record like good things, or is it like so good still and we are not knowing as society?
I really don't understand when you're saying that, there is no gold standard of journalism. Yes, there is no gold standard of journalism, but there is a right and wrong. I mean, I understand that you will probably go into the debate of what is right and what is wrong, and there is nothing that is right and what is wrong.
Just speak whatever you want. I'm not going to delve into the debate because it's not about that.
I'm saying there is a right and wrong. If a political party, again, as I've said, is sending MLAs to the parliament where 50% of them have criminal cases like rape, murder, assault, kidnapping on them, and that includes 50% of the members of this party, and there's another party that has only 1% or 2% people with criminal cases, there is a difference. There may not be a gold standard. There is no gold standard of things anywhere. As I said, politicians are also people. There are good and bad people, and there are good and bad politicians. And even if you go to Sweden, you go to United States of America, you go to, I don't know what utopia are you expecting, where, there is no utopia anywhere. There are no absolutely good human beings anywhere, but there is a difference between a person who murders and a person who feeds the pigeons, who feeds the dogs, who feeds the orphans. And saying that, no, I mean, उससे भी कभी गलती हो गई और ये इसने भी मर्डर कर लिया, एक ही बात है, gold standard तो है नहीं. That, I guess, is being a little lazy,
No, in terms of, I expect you to at least leave intellectually lazy, as a person.
Yeah, but if you are saying that I should be allowed to not have a clear-cut political opinion, and that's perfectly all right. In fact, we as a society would want thinking individuals, thinking individuals who say, listen, I while I may agree with 5 things you say, I don't agree with these 2 things you say. And that's how thinking individuals and people who take their necks out, you also help in setting the narrative. If you want to, eventually as a political party, we may want to pick up those 2 things that you've given us, and we may actually have something to ponder on and say, listen, no, these given us these two things, we should think about that. But all I'm saying is, even if you want to stay out, brilliant. You don't want to have a political opinion, absolutely okay. If you're privileged enough to not have a political, I mean, when Article 370 was abrogated, many people were indifferent. They were indifferent because it did not affect them, right? So similarly, when 2014 elections came or 2019 elections came, again, not saying the right and wrong of it, many people don't care about, let's suppose, the BJP, because it does not affect them. But some do support them, some do oppose them, because those who are opposing them, it does matter very greatly to them. And you obviously cannot force anybody to come in. But the only point is, if you want to have a, my only limited point is, if you're saying that you want a political point, you want to agree with some party on some things, you don't want to agree with some party on something, absolutely right. We want thinking individuals. But if you have those 2 points, make them forward. If you want to put them forward, put them forward. Maybe the party that you don't like on these 2 points will actually get the time to see what's wrong and, do some soul searching over those 2 points, and maybe that would help that party to become better. I would just say that if it was to me, I would want people who are not apolitical to engage with political parties constructively. And those political parties, obviously, I mean, you can't engage with a political party you completely disagree with. For example, I can never engage with the BJP because there is no, we don't meet, it's the East and the West. But if, for example, I want to engage with the Congress, I would want to engage with them on certain points because we may have disagreements somewhere, we may have agreements somewhere. So there is that scope for engagement. And if there is that scope for engagement, I would suggest that do engage constructively.
I mean, that's a well, placed point. I have taken the thing, but then in the last concluding, part of this conversation, I would like you to reply to certain questions. It's not a rapid fire though, because I don't either have not any hamper to offer, nor do I, distribute prizes on the basis of the questions. But these are the questions that I have. Few questions, then we'll wrap it up. Ifra has, say for example, Ifra has a political inspiration. She has an individual that she's inspired by in politics. Who will that be?
One individual, Ilhan Omar.
Okay, and the best book who has changed your life?
I was about to say, Arundhati Roy's work, but I would say A House for Mr. Biswas. It's a very boring sort of a book, but it's helped me deal with a lot of anxiety I had about life.
Oh, come again? Reread it.
A House for Mr. Biswas by V.S. Naipaul. And you might find that book very, very boring. You might find that there's nothing left in the book. But the context I read the book in, the kind of anxiety I had about life, the kind of anxiety I had about everything else, the book taught me that no matter what, things are going to be okay. And I've relied on that book emotionally hugely. So I think, yeah, I'm thankful to that book.
I mean, if I'll be asked the same questions, I'll still go that I am a student of international politics. I don't normally just read books that are of this genre, that on society, on other things. But if they help me understand and build my own point or argument, I'll go with that. But a person who has seriously inspired me, I got a hand on the book list of Jiddu Krishnamurti. He does have this sort of, he has a convergence rate, a very good one, and then he has a lovely argument to make, and he creates kind of lot of things out of the thin air, and then I have been loving his collection. And then there is also a question that if Ifra be given a chance, who would she be? Will she continue as a spokesperson of the same party, or she will just have different political choice in future someday?
Absolutely not. I would continue to be in the national conference the way I am going.
Okay, it's a
speaking for the
political
people.
loyalty then. That's important.
Not really, it's not political loyalty. I do see which political party is loyal to the people. And to me, National Conference, I mean, you may disagree with me, you're free to disagree with me. But at this point, I can see that National Conference is being loyal to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and that's why I will stick to them no matter what. And that it's been loyal to them for last 70 years. And I say it not because I read some article somewhere or because I read some book somewhere or saw the debate somewhere, because of the kind of personal experiences I've had, because of the kind of way I've understood how the system works, how the central government works, what they've gone through, what they want from them. It's it's a maze, you know. It will take you, like it took me a good 10 years to understand this whole game. It took me a ton of reading to understand what the hell was going on. Um, and it took me all that time to understand that there is, ever since 70 years, the only thing any central government has tried to do is to break national conference. And the second question that automatically flies is, why are they breaking national conference? Because they're standing up for the people, and there is no way I'll leave them.
Again, I'll slightly disagree with that because that's my personal opinion, but I'll not speak about that. Now, the next thing is that if you will be given a chance to undo a single thing in your life so far, what will that be?
I'm sorry, what?
If you will be given a chance, or you get a
Could you
chance
please
to
repeat you?
if you are given a chance to undo anything that you may dislike about your life so far, what will that be?
If it's one thing I'll undo about my life, to be very honest, I don't think I'll undo anything about my life, you know. I've made
So it
mistakes.
has
Mistakes are a part of life, but
come so
I
organically,
mean,
right?
it's not come very organically. I mean, I've been thinking that there are many, I mean, I would think of 100 different chances, 100 different things I would want to rectify in life. But then if I actually rectified them in life, if I rectified all of those things in life, then I would have taken an entirely different trajectory in life. And right now, the kind of trajectory I've taken is because of the kind of mistakes I at times made in life. And they pushed you somewhere else, they push you somewhere else. And I think, you know, at this point, I don't want to change anything in my life, any mistake in my past. But if it's one thing you ask me, I think I'll maybe say that I wish I'd had more fun in college and in school, and I'd more enjoyed with my classmates rather than constantly putting my head in the library and worrying about future and worrying about exams. I think so much of my college life and so much of my school life was, should I say, wasted, because I was so paranoid about future. I wish I'd taken a bit of, you know, time off and, you know, gone to picnics and enjoyed like my fellow classmates and fellow, batchmates did.
And then, if you were to define IFRA in a single line, would you please for us?
I'm sorry?
If you have to define IFRA in
If
a
I had
single
to,
line, precisely.
Ifra is just a woman like anybody else who's trying to do a little bit good in her own way, like all of us are doing, you know.
So, any good future endeavors that we would like from you, that you are having presently, that when all this thing is will happen, that elections will be conducted, and then post that, after this all is done, any future endeavors that will come across?
As of now, I don't have any future endeavors connected to elections at all. The only future endeavor that I do have is to start my legal practice as soon as possible, my law practice in the court, so that so much of the things that I also want to do legally side by side for the people, filing PILs. I mean, for example, if I was a lawyer at this point, I would have filed a PIL for the street vendors at this point. So many PILs, so many pro bono cases, which I so badly feel I want to take up at this point, but I'm not able to take because I'm not registered with the bar. So that is going to be a future endeavor I'm looking forward to. Obviously, while connecting to my party, am I looking at At electoral future endeavor, no, absolutely not. If I was looking to that, I wouldn't be in politics. I would probably have taken a flight abroad and live. I would have probably been living a very luxurious life abroad, you know.
And then two last things that so far that you have, I guess it is a year or so that you have joined politics. What's important? Is the perception building
When
important in politics, or there is something else to it?
I'm sorry, is the is what? Ek second. Let me. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. What do you say?
People talk. See, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. You're very audible.
Most people who are outsiders, that we as people who are not in active politics, they talk about this political perception or perception building. How do you take that? Is political perception building important, or there is something more to it?
You see, political perception building matters when your audience is not very bright. When your audience is not very politically, I wouldn't say bright. I would take that back. I would say your political perception matters a lot when your audience is not acquainted with history and current affairs the way it should be. But what at the end of the day matters is your work on ground. आप कितने भी प्रशांत किशोर हायर करो, आप कितने भी आईपैक टीम्स हायर करो, आप कितने भी सोशल मीडिया टीम्स हायर करो, आप कितने भी पीआर टीम्स हायर करो, इट विल नॉट टेक अवे फ्रॉम यू योर वर्क, यू नो. अगर आपने एक काम किसी के लिए किया है, दैट पर्सन इज गोइंग टू रिमेंबर दैट वर्क फॉर द रेस्ट ऑफ हिज लाइफ, यू नो. सो at the end of the day, I understand that a lot of people work on political perceptions because it helps them get that short-term publicity and short-term work. But at the end of the day, people are not stupid. People are not dumb. They do see what you are made of inside. And, you know, people are very perceptive. And in our part of the world, in Jammu and Kashmir, no, they know history, they know work, they know, they understand current affairs. आप जम्मू और कश्मीर के लोगों को मुझे लगता है कोई बेवकूफ नहीं बना सकता है. आप कहीं और के लोगों को बना लो, यू नो. So perception doesn't matter in Jammu and Kashmir. What matters in Jammu and Kashmir is your work and only your work.
Okay. One last thing from my side is that if you were to rate this conversation on a lighter note, on the scale of 10, what will it be?
I think I'll give it a 9.5. It was very decent, very candid,
very
non-political.
We seriously wish you all the best for your future endeavors, whatever that be, and we wish you all the best for your life and career, and we wish you to actually go to the national level. We love your debates, but until there is political decency in the debates, most often the panels and all that, it just crashes upon like anything. We get upset, the audience gets upset, and then all the entire argument just derails. So we wish you all the best. Thank you for coming to our conversation. I seriously loved it, and it was so dense. It was so good and so honest. I hope that next time we'll expect you soon. Once things just get clear from my side, because I am in the research stuff. So thank you for coming to us on this podcast.
Thank you, Mehrad Saab, for calling me. I also wish you luck with the podcast. May more and more people come, and may you have a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure. I'll just be trying to rope more people in, because I love conversations. It's not something that I'm not getting paid by either the YouTube or the Zoom or any other platform for that. It's just my personal passion that to strike conversations. I love to engage with the people from different straitjackets. So it makes me happy. Otherwise, I'm not pushed to it. I'm not compulsed to it.
Yeah, this is something I would say, that this is something that should make meaningful conversations are something everybody, I guess, looks forward to, you know. So to more meaningful conversations like this.
I expect you to spread this word, and I'll be sharing the links, and thank you for coming. Thank you.
Inshallah, definitely.
Thank you. Okay.